Care Nanotechnology workplace webinar regarding drug testing in the country. My name is Nathan Keel. I am an executive at Point of Care Nanotechnology, and I have been spending years now looking into the problems, the solutions, and the other options that are available out there in the country for workplace drug testing. And what are the ways that we can save the most time, the most money, and have the best experience overall with drug testing, knowing that it's reliable. So without further ado, I'm going to jump right into the presentation, and we're going to hopefully learn a little bit today. So our goal has been to make drug testing easy, and we're going to talk a little bit about that at the end. But first, I want to go into the history quickly of drug testing. It's been around for a while. Everybody knows about drug testing. It actually goes back thousands of years, but the first big innovation that happened in our centuries was the drunkometer that was developed in 1938, and most of you will recognize uh, the iterations of it later called the breathalyzer or the intoxalyzer, which was phenomenal to help people determine a little bit better whether or not someone was under the influence of alcohol, whether it was out in the streets with police departments using it for DUIs, or in the workplace using it for post-accident or random drug screening or whatever that is. We all know that drug testing has major flaws currently, and because of that, employees know that they can cheat the system. So in a study that was done in 2014, people found out that over half the country of workers know of somebody that has gone to the workplace under the influence. Not a surprise, not a shock to anybody. We all know what's going on. So with that, SAMHSA and the Department of Transportation recently came out with a major update in their policies, and they are now, for the first time ever, accepting saliva as a matrix for them to be able to drug test their federal government employees and Department of Transportation truck drivers, bus drivers, airline pilots, whatever. That was a huge move because previous to that, they didn't trust saliva, or they didn't trust the methods that saliva were drug testing involved. And then in 2023, we came out with the Easy Saliva 2 device, which is completely revolutionizing drug testing, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So with that being said, there's really two main ways that companies are doing drug testing right now. After interviewing thousands of companies and police departments, I now know that the number one way that people are using drug testing in the workplace is by sending someone to a clinic, and that causes major issues. As you guys already know, the clinics aren't always open. They're usually open 9 to 5, and so if you have overnight shifts, you're not able to send anybody to a clinic at that time, and you're going to miss out on hours of employee labor while also typically paying for those employees at the same time until they can get drug tested in the morning. It's a no-win solution for anybody. Second problem is you're sending someone to a health clinic where there's a lot of other sick people or a lot of sick people, so you're putting your employee at risk. Third problem that often arises is if they are under the influence, you don't want them driving by themselves to a clinic to get in a car accident or whatever that the case may be. So you may have to get a second employee or third employee involved to drive them to the clinic, and then that's two people's salaries or hourly wages that you're having to pay at the same time. Fourth problem is because they're able to drive themselves typically, or because there's a time delay between when they're at the work site and you want them to get drug tested and they have to go to the clinic, they have many opportunities to be able to cheat the system and get prepared for that drug test. Typically, the clinics are just using urine drug testing, which then allows the person to cheat it with fake urine, diluted urine, or somebody else's urine, or whatever the case may be. And that is rampant, and everybody knows it. The second option that some companies are using is hiring someone to come into the workplace and drug test them in a bathroom at the work site. This is great because it's more convenient. You're able to bring somebody on site. You don't have to send somebody out. It is a more expensive option because you have to pay for the collector to come in and do that. But some companies like having a third party doing that or being in charge of that. You do have to shut down a bathroom and shut off the water and make sure that everything is secure in that situation. but it also arises problems with potentially having the employee, whether it's male or female, not have a collector that is male or female be able to be behind them. So that causes some other major issues with gender politics and all of that that comes with it. So with the Department of Transportation and SAMHSA announcements, the biggest reason why they did that was because they finally feel like there are good enough methods to be able to drug test with saliva, and it solves all those major issues. It's convenient, it's reliable, and it's less invasive than anything else. The other problem is THC. Many companies around the country are worrying about THC, wondering what they can do to drug test for THC. One of the big things that's going on is some states are even changing their laws whether or not employers can test for THC metabolite, which is important to know. THC metabolite will show up in your urine after you metabolize the drug. The problem with urine testing, one of the biggest problems, is the fact that when you ingest a drug, the urine won't receive that drug for typically 4 to 8 hours. And so they could be high as a kite or under the influence, and you drug test them with urine and they're not going to test positive. Or the other problem is once it does enter that system, it'll stay there for up to 30 to 45 days after they ingested that drug. So if they took THC while it was legal in their off hours over the weekend, and then 7, 10, 12 days later they were drug tested, they will test positive for THC even though it had no influence in their work behavior. And that's a huge issue. And so oral fluid or blood or breath are much better options because they will determine only recent drug use. Typically with blood and oral fluid, depending on the drug, it'll only last in your system from anywhere from 6 to 24 hours. So you're only looking at recent drug use, and that helps with THC testing. You can also just test for THC native, which is the drug itself versus the metabolite version of the drug. So that's something that you can do with saliva. There's no gender issues with saliva. You can pull out a swab and swab somebody right in front of everybody else. There's no privacy issues with that as well. You can do on-the-spot collection anywhere, anytime. So instead of having to send someone to a bathroom, you can pull out the drug test like law enforcement is out in the road and just drug test somebody out in the streets. You can do it at the construction site. You can do it anywhere. And now, with all the studies that have been done over the past couple decades, saliva is proven to be just as good, if not better, than blood as far as reliability goes. So we have invented a brand new device that is revolutionizing how drug testing is being done because it solves every single issue that comes into play. Number one, the collection time is the fastest saliva test you can find. Most saliva tests take 10 to 15 minutes to collect enough saliva because drug users have low saliva amounts, and then elderly also have dry mouth and they don't typically produce very much saliva. This will collect in 90 seconds or less. It is the most accurate saliva test on the market, proven by different third-party studies. We are the only test in the country that has a split sample collection. This is extremely important. Number one, when you push the saliva test down, it has two different swabs. The first swab will push the saliva over to these strips, which will give you an immediate or preliminary reading of up to 14 drugs and alcohol on the spot. We can test for fentanyl, THC, cocaine, methamphetamines, opiates, whatever you want, you name it. And we are very customizable, so we can customize to whatever you may want to drug test for. The second part, when the preliminary test shows a presumptive positive, you will want to confirm that, and you can confirm it with the same collection that you did already. And so this second swab will push down the saliva into this vial, which you can then send off to a crime lab or whatever type of lab that you need. And we've got partners around the country to be able to do this. That will then do a confirmatory test, which will give you the exact nanogram reading of the drugs in their system. And then it'll be sent off to an MRO, medical review officer, so that a doctor can then call the patient or donor find out what prescription medication they're on, and find out if it was an illicit or a legal drug to tell you whether or not you should take action against them or not. This is extremely important. You cannot just screen people and decide to fire them or not hire them. That is unjustifiable firing or not hiring. If they were to take you to court in any scenario where you just use a screen only, they will win every single time. The screen is called a preliminary response or test for a reason. You need it to be confirmed at a lab through very expensive equipment with lab technicians who are certified to be able to run those tests and read those results. And then it has to go to a medical review officer to decide whether or not it's a legal or illegal drug. If you do not go through that process, you will lose in court. And that is a high risk um, scenario if you're not doing confirmatory testing for presumptive positives. The nice part about the screen is that it takes away the negatives. So anybody that is negative, you're able to immediately know that on the spot and send them back to work or hire them right away. You don't have to wait 3 or 4 days for them to get another job elsewhere or for you to pay them while they're at home. You can get an immediate answer and do it right there. So, what does the confirmatory test look like? The screen obviously is just positive or negative, but the confirmatory test is going to give you the exact nanograms and the exact type of drug. It's going to be a full lab report that you're going to get from the MRO after they review the report themselves. This is an example of a lab report that we have. That's a 4-page report. Now, the testing process, we already talked about it, but it's extremely simple. It's a 90-second collection. We can certify anybody in the world, nearly, to become a certified observer / collector of this test. So they'll put the swab under the tongue for 90 seconds after they swab the cheeks. After that, you'll slowly place it down into the device or the cartridge, and it will lock completely, ensuring chain of custody. Now, this is really important. The chain of custody cannot be broken. You have to know who's handling the sample and how they handled the sample to ensure that nobody cheated the sample or changed or added drugs in or whatever the case may be to that sample en route to the lab when it gets confirmed. You'll get the immediate reading on the spot, and then you'll be able to send it off to the lab. Now, some people have brought up concerns of their own managers or HR people using this test. Some people immediately see the value of it, but I just want to say we have covered every single base for the companies to be able to have their own HR managers be certified observers / collectors. We have a training that everyone will go through. They'll be certified from the company itself so that they can do it, and it fulfills the state requirements in many different states. And then we have this software that we developed that covers the entire process so that everything is tracked completely. This is another additional part that we've done to make sure that you are covered. They'll first put in the test information, the barcode number, patient identifiers, whatever that is. They'll then go into doing the collection and they'll mark down the results. And then very importantly, after the results have been first administered or read from the preliminary screen, both the donor and the collector will sign off stating that the collection was done according to the rules and according to the way that we train them to do it. That way, every base is covered. We also have an additional feature coming out in the future for any company that wants to get additional uh, ways of ensuring that that they're covered their bases, where we will have a recording available so that you can record the whole process and record the collection. It's very simple and very easy to do. We'll put that into this software so that you can include that in there as evidence, so that if anything ever goes to court, we will be backing the results with court testimony and making sure that you have what you need to state that you did a valid and certified drug test for this employee and you made the right decision according to what the results were. Now let's compare saliva tests in general out in the market. You can always go to Amazon and find anything. It may or may not be good. I will state right here that the Amazon test kits that you can find very inexpensively are directly coming from out of the country, and they are not very accurate. We have done studies on them. They don't show positives very often. So if you're just looking for a negative and trying to move on, that's a great option for you. But if you're actually looking for an accurate test to ensure that you're keeping your workplace safe, then you're going to want to look at other options. There is something called the Sotoxa machine that Abbott has developed. It's $5,000 up front for the device. It's a reader that you put a cartridge in, and every time you use that cartridge, it's $30 for the consumables. It can screen up to 6 drugs, but it cannot be used in court. It is a preliminary test only. The other options are confirmation tests only. Most other swabs, actually all other swabs, will take a minimum of 10 minutes of swabbing the mouth and holding it in there, and then up to even 15 minutes. And even then, 1/3 of those collections don't have enough liquid or saliva to be able to run those tests when they get back to the lab. Or you can use the Easy Saliva 2 device, which is a 90-second collection. We always get enough liquid because we have pre-soaked our swabs with a buffer solution that we developed with Johnson & Johnson that is the only buffer solution safe enough to put inside somebody's mouth. And with that, we collect plenty of liquid or fluid to be able to do testing. It has no setup cost. We do the trainings and we'll send that for free along with the certifications and anything else that you may need along with the software. It's $45 per test typically. We can screen up to 13 drugs and alcohol. The lab confirmation can catch up to 96 analytes when you send it back to the lab, and it will hold up in court. And this is the only saliva test that will hold up in court that police departments are using around the country. So we cover you again from A to Z. We get the preliminary results anywhere, anytime. You can pull it out, do a collection construction site. You can do it on the side of the road. You can do it anywhere. We can do even video recordings. You can do remote proctoring if you want to do a collection or observation over Google Meet or Zoom or whatever you use. We can do that through our software. We will cover the chain of custody. We'll cover the shipping label features. We'll cover randomization in that software. It's all included for free. We just want you to use our test. And then when you need a lab confirmation, every single part of that step is covered with the full lab report, the shipping, and the MRO review. You only pay for the lab confirmation when you need it. So it is a separate fee whenever you need it. Right now, typically about one-tenth of all drug tests done in the workplace come back presumptive positive. And so you're typically only going to need a lab confirmation 1 out of every 10 tests. So hopefully that answers a lot of your questions as far as where the country's at with drug testing. Most companies around the world are shifting away from urine drug testing because of the long delay and the detection window problems that we talked about, as well as all the other ones. Excuse the typo there for the vendor paperwork. But typically what we do, it's very simple. We send you an invoice. If you need to send us a purchase order, you can, but we can just send an invoice directly. You'll pay. As soon as you pay, we'll send the shipment out. But in the process of us sending the invoice to you, we will start training your collectors, whoever that is, so that the HR managers can pull out a test anytime or any night, wherever they're at, to be able to drug test the employees. And then we'll also start setting up your software. So you can get that software set up. By the time you get your test kits, we'll be able to do a virtual training with the main collector where they will do a demonstration where they'll administer a test on themselves so they know what it feels like, tastes like, looks like. And then after that, all the other managers will just do a virtual training. That's a 20-minute pre-recorded training that they can do, and they'll get certified. And it's very simple. So our goal is to make drug testing easy. Right now, we're going to open it up to a live Q&A. We have different reps from the company that are very experienced and knowledgeable throughout the different states. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask right now. This is the perfect time. Thank you for listening to the pre-recorded session. We'll end this and go into the Q&A now. Thanks again for jumping on.